Good evening, good evening. What's going on, family? Hope y'all doing well. We coming to you a little bit earlier than expected, but hope y'all are doing well. I'm gonna give just a minute for people to hop on. We'll see if anybody joins us. Wave at me if you can hear me. Wave at me if you can hear me. Oh, we got Ali in the building already. Wave at me if you can hear me. What's up, fam? Come on in, come on in. If you can hear me, tell me where you are watching. Tell me where you watching from. Want to shout out your place, shout out your zip code, put on for your city, all the above. What's up, fam? How y'all doing? What up, what up? We'll give you about 30 more seconds before we bring Ali on. We're going to get into this behind the mic on our Leave Loud story. How y'all doing? How y'all doing? What's up, fam? Okay, I see you. What's going on? What's going on? It's in the building, Madison, Indianapolis, Springdale. Oh my goodness. So many different people. Chicago, obviously Chicago's always going to be represented in the building. Always. Well, what's up, Ali?
Chicago.
What's going on,
Hey,
fam?
hey, can y'all hear me, first of
Yeah,
all?
I can hear you. What's going on, fam?
Oh, good, good. I'm nothing much, just out here. Pretty
Listen,
much. I'm
listen.
just out here.
You just out here flaming the people with these Leave Loud stories, with these details, everything. Wow. This is wild, Joe. We finally got you on the Leave Loud.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely wild. That's
What
that
has
that
the last
is a good
24 hours been like for you?
it's been very interesting. First of all, I mean, I guess that there's the feeling of being exposed. I mean, I'm sharing things that some of the things that I've shared. I'm trying to think of like everything that I shared in the episode, but there are a lot of those things that I have not shared publicly or shared as publicly. Like there's a couple of things I think I've said on other shows, but not as publicly as Pass the Mic, right? Pass the Mic is like top 20, top 40 Christian podcast, and so it's like a much bigger audience. And so to say that out, and then as part of kind of like this Leave Loud conversation, there's an element of that's very exposing.
Right.
So yeah, so I definitely feel kind of vulnerable and exposed. And then of course, because I talk entirely too much, we have two parts. So there's like a whole other part. So it's not even like, oh hey, this happened, I did this, and it's like the end, goodbye. Like I have a whole other part that now I have to sit through. So it's felt like it's been a week, but then at the same time, like it's not been a week, like it's been like hours. It feels like it just came out.
Yeah, you know what, I think I'm really glad there's a part two. Like, I think because one of the conversations that we had about this, behind the scenes was how important it is for your story to be told in full, and for your story to really be heard, and the things that were on your heart to share in particular to really be shared. And we know this is just a drop in the bucket, but the things that you want to share, I think it's very important to actually get that full story as you felt it, right? Because it's a feeling. That was the first thing, in the first portion of this. Like, I felt where you were coming from, and I felt where you were. And you mentioned something about this on Twitter that I thought was really interesting, is that this is a drop in the bucket, that you got stories on stories on stories. What do we think about all the stories that we have, and I know Black Christians and Black people will identify with this. How did you decide which ones to tell? Like, how did you decide which ones, and there's still a part two, of course, but how did you decide which ones to tell?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there was one story that I knew that I wanted to tell, and that story shows up in some of the stage was set for in part one, but it shows up in part two. Now, like I'm like, oh, I knew, and everybody's gonna be like, part two. They're gonna be like, oh my gosh, she like built it up for this. What? Like this? I mean, hopefully y'all don't feel that way. Hopefully part two is satisfying for you all. But there was one particular story that I knew that I wanted to tell. And so then it was kind of, so then determining kind of what I would talk about was sort of some of the through lines to that story. But then also some of it too was just, in the moment as you and Jamar were asking me questions, telling one story. So it was like, well, might as well go ahead and throw that one out. So I knew that I wanted to tell the Stonewall Jackson story that was in the first one. I knew that I wanted to tell that one. But then I don't think that I had planned on telling the George Zimmerman story. It was because as I was kind of like going through and writing some things down, I think that it was there, but I don't think that I had maybe I had intended to tell it. I can't remember, but I think that it was just kind of like, oh, okay, while I'm here, might as well tell that story. There were also some stories that I had thought that I would tell, but then kind of just as time wore on, because and I told Tyler about this, I wasn't expecting to talk so much about my background. I thought, oh, like we're just gonna get right into being around these white folks story, which of course, my upbringing is being around the white folks story too. So I think that also I was like, okay, so I'm not gonna be on this for like 20 hours like Jamar Tyler, like all the microphones sleep and I'm still talking, telling this story. But anyway, so there were some things that I thought that I was going to tell, that I ended up just making the decision not to tell, just in the interest of getting to the thing that I really felt like I needed to tell.
Yeah, and I just want to publicly, affirm that it is good for you to tell that, and it is good for you to set it up. And I just want to publicly affirm that because I know it can be very exposing, in the midst of sharing those stories and wondering how people are going to receive them and what they're going to say about them, how they're going to react to the way you tell the story. And but this is your story. You should tell it in the way that is true to you, and you did that. And so I just want to affirm that. I don't care how long it was. Personally, like I've been listening to it again, having sat in the conversation still. Like, I think it's just so powerful to really express that. And yeah, I think I can't wait to hear more, in different settings as you share it. One of the most interesting parts for you, Ali, is our intersection with, Pentecostal charismatic religion
Mm-hmm.
and how that influences so much of us in a positive, but then also the underside of that, which is the reality
Mm-hmm.
of, sometimes in its most truncated, limited forms, can be very myopic and can also be very over spiritualized.
Mm-hmm.
How do you view that now? Because I mean, you talk a little bit about this in previous episodes, but I would, after hearing those stories come out of your mouth again, what you experienced, how do you feel about it? Because sometimes I feel like personally, I can look at, the Pentecostal side of my story and kind of be like, man, it's kind of wild, in certain areas and in certain contexts. So how do you feel about it now?
So for me, the biggest thing is contextualization. And so I think that, I am an Episcopalian. Like now, that's my denominational home now, and we'll see what the Lord does with that and where the Lord takes me. But I always say that I'm Episcopalian. I'm an Anglican, and maybe I always have been, or kind of discovered maybe that I was, but I'm also Pentecostal and charismatic to my bones. And so I believe in spiritual experiences. I believe that the Lord can speak a now word to us. I believe in the gifts of the Spirit. I believe in the exercise of the gifts of the Spirit, and so that's not something that has changed for me. Even though in my current worship context, those things look different.
Hmm.
But then those a lot of those things can still be present, but they just look a little bit different, or you exercise them a little bit differently. But then whenever we start talking about some of the experiences of the past, something that I've had to do is, first of all, I guess I'll say it this way. While I was in the midst of some of these things, I wasn't like, oh, I just bought into all of it wholesale. And something that I don't think that I probably communicated very well, because I think it kind of leaves a question like, okay, if there's all this stuff happening, that's weird. You know, they're praying a prayer where they're singing about Stonewall Jackson. Why the heck are you there? And so I want, maybe you had that question, maybe you didn't. So I want to frame that in my context, in my life. I grew up around white people acting racist and prejudiced and everything else. And growing up in a small town, you still had to interact with people. So where I grew up, the owner of McDonald's was racist. And so it was like, you know, we chose how we interacted with that institution. But so like, yeah, you know, we're gonna go and get a Happy Meal from McDonald's, even though, you know, that we know the owner is racist. But then like I wasn't allowed to work there as a teenager. And so you have to, so it's kind of, you learn to pick and choose your battles. And so growing up in a predominantly white and very racist context, you learn how to pick and choose your battles. So there's some things that it's like you just know, okay, these people are prejudiced, and you still have to interact with them. You still might have to do life with them in some respect. You know, one of my aunties was a home health nurse. Now she's a director of nurses at a nursing home. She would go into people's homes and they would be talking about the darkies, and like she still had to provide health care to these people. I'm sure that they probably still run into it at the healthcare facility that she works at, where you have some old racist white people. So I say all that to say, then, you know, put it into my context in being in some of these churches and some of these contexts where people were racist. It's like I recognize this is a problem, but it wasn't, but there wasn't really a point until or excuse me, I didn't realize until I got a little bit older and had a little bit more life experience, like, hold on a second, I actually don't have to tolerate that treatment.
Mm.
Because I had grown up with, again, the owner of whatever restaurant is racist. The people that the teacher, the person that you interact with in some significant capacity in your life is racist, and you just have to deal with that. And you just have to kind of swallow that indignity, and you know that they are, and you're mad about them, and you're going to talk about them in other contexts. But while you're there, you just kind of, you know, this is what this is. It's a much different, hopefully that makes sense, but it's much different than being able to just be like, okay, well that's racist and I'm just not going to interact with it. So I guess that to sum up, you know, in a small town rural context where there's limited access to certain things, you don't have a whole lot of choice. And so I learned that I didn't have a whole lot of choice in interacting with racist white people. And so I carried that into adulthood, just being like, okay, well, these people are racist. I know they're racist.
Mm.
Anybody with eyes knows that they're racist. I know that that prayer is racist. I know that this thing that they're saying and doing is racist, but not realizing, like, wait a minute, I actually have the agency to say,
Mm.
I don't have to be like that's a racist prayer. I can actually confront these people and say, yo, that was racist. Y'all don't need to do that again. I did not realize that. And the thing that took me that I finally started to realize that is, first of all, just becoming like an adult and just being like, hold on a second, like, you know, I got a house, a mortgage, bills, and children, and you know what, I don't have to take I don't have to take people's nonsense. You know, just realizing, hold up, I'm free, black, and over 21. Wait a minute. Why am I accepting this kind of treatment? And so there just got to be an aspect where, and then also I think being in different contexts where it's like, you know what? I actually can take my black behind someplace else if I need to. And recognizing that, that's like, wait a minute, I don't have to be here. Hold on a second. I don't actually have to interact with you. And so that was something that gave me the agency to just be like, okay, no, I'm gonna like once I realized that, you know, you shall know the truth and the truth shall make you free. Well, once Allie knew that, like, wait a minute, you don't just have to let white people just be over here just popping off racist, and you mad about it, I'm mad about it. I'm going home being like, oh my gosh, you know, this person said something that was so incredibly racist. Like, I am so hurt and offended by somebody telling me that I need to go back to Africa if I don't like it here. I realized, wait a minute, I can talk back to the
Mm,
racism. I can talk back to this. And Ferguson was the thing that for me, that was the thing. It was like, wait a minute. I started talking back to white supremacy because with Ferguson, I had gotten so fed up with white people's racism just coming out. And again, I'm from Missouri. Ferguson's in Missouri. I knew people who are St. Louisians who lived around St. Louis. I had people who took Ferguson really personally because it was Missouri. And I just realized, like, wait a minute, I don't have to take this. You out here showing your entire self, and I'm going to talk back to it because it's wrong. So that's what I did.
that's so powerful that you're naming that. And people need to understand that this is the purpose of Leave Loud. Like, this is why Leave Loud exists. Because for many of us, we never heard a theological or a Christian or a, God informed, spirit led permission and true word about our own agency as it relates to how people treat us. Like, we just didn't hear that. And so we were just like, oh, okay. And even and this is how powerful it is. And there's so much that we're going to get into with, trauma and pain and addressing that over the next few weeks. But, it's so powerful, that even now, as we tell our stories, we have to push that thought down. We have to remind ourselves of the truth of our own agency. We have to
Mm-hmm.
remind ourselves of the truth. We have to tell each other that. That's how
Mm-hmm.
powerful. And people don't know that, so they see us and we're just, talking, and we're being strong and forceful. And behind the scenes, we're asking real questions of each other, like, man, is this, are we supposed to do this? Is this cool? Like,
Mm-hmm.
are we okay? Like, do you think this is good? You think I should say
Mm-hmm.
this? I mean, really asking these questions, not out of fear, but constantly having to push away and rebuke uh,
Mm-hmm.
the words of the enemy,
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
our hearts and our minds. And so I think hearing that is so powerful, that for many Black Christians, they've never felt like they had the agency just to say, no, I don't have to take that. Like, what?
Mm-hmm.
This is not God's will for my life. This is not flourishing for me. Um,
Exactly.
this is not just common human conflict. No, this is toxicity. This is sin. It's unrepentant.
Mm-hmm.
Why am I gonna sit here, right? That is so powerful for people to hear, and they need to hear that again and again. We talk a little bit about it in this first part, but I don't think it can be said enough. It's a difference between my story and your story, Jamar's story and your story, because as a Black woman, it's a different experience, and
Mm-hmm.
and we will never understand that, and we will never be able to embody that experience and to truly feel the layers of it. As you heard, be honest about this. As you heard our stories, what did you think about the intersections between the fact that we as men just have a different experience? And did you hear some things in our stories that it was like, you know, some black men, you know what I'm saying? Like, be real, like, is that something you heard? You were like, yeah, y'all was taking up space. Y'all wouldn't fight.
So I'll say it this way. I think that it is very something that I find extremely interesting is that Black men in white contexts are, if not seeking parity with white men, y'all are given a lot of leeway to be able to do stuff. And I mean, and especially now we can talk about. I'll speak to a few different dynamics here all at once, so hopefully I'm able to tease this out. So both you and Jamar, your wives are you're married to Black women.
Mhm.
And so they're what I have perceived, black. Yes, I've not had the pleasure of meeting Mylena yet. We've yelled
Ooh.
at one another across Zoom, but I've met Janae, and Jamar's wife Janae. Yeah, she's yes. And I know you tell me enough about Mylena. I already know about Mylena. I already know that me and Mylena we gonna be like this. Like it's gonna be watch out. But I really perceive in some of these white church spaces that there is a hierarchy of how, and I will speak specifically to the Black experience, but then I also want y'all to interweave in non-Black people of color into this because they also fit at various places in the hierarchy. So the hierarchy in white institutions, white-led institutions, is this: white men at the top, white women are next, Black men are under white women. Now there are times when the two might flip. If you have an extremely patriarchal context, then there are going to be times that the Black men and the white women are going to be the same, because the white men are going to protect the white women at all costs, but then and so the white women are going to subjugate the Black men because of race, but then the Black men get to subjugate the white women on gender.
Yes.
But I come from egalitarian contexts where the hierarchy is white men, white women, Black men married to white women,
Mm.
Black men married to Black women, Black women, and then that's it. And there really is no difference
Yeah.
in your treatment if you're married, whether you're married to a white man, whether you're married to a Black man. There is no difference in how you are treated whatsoever. And so I say that then to say that to answer the question, whenever I'm hearing you and Jamar like talk about, getting opportunities to speak at a conference, getting pulled in to do things here and there, I'm like, these people ain't trying to ask no Black woman to do none of that. Like, like y'all ain't trying to ask no Black woman to speak at your conference, especially in a complementarian setting. It's almost as if we don't. It's almost as if Black women don't exist. So it's like we are just there because like I said, white women even in those contexts exist. Now again, you can weave non-Black people of color, but I would make the argument that Black women are almost always at the bottom. We are always the base of that pyramid, and everything else is built upon our backs. So in listening to some of that, y'all just had to deal with the racism.
Mm-hmm.
I have had to deal with racialized sexism, and when we start talking about the intersections of oppressions here, the idea is that like I was reading something where somebody was talking about Kimberly Crenshaw, about her idea of intersectionality, that oftentimes people will think like, oh, it's how all these identities play with one another. But the person gave the example that's like, you know what, if you are crossing 8th Street and Pine Street and you are in the intersection of 8th Street and Pine Street, there's a point where in the middle of that intersection where you don't know if you're on 8th Street or you don't know if you're
Mm.
on Pine Street. And so whenever you have an intersection in your identity with racism and sexism or whatever it is, whatever the marginalizations are, it's hard to tell where one set of marginalizations end and the others begin. And so a lot of the stories that I told, some of the stories that I told, or some of the stories I tell, because I guess I did tell almost specifically racist stories, but I guess I did talk about how some of my interaction with men. There was a point in time whenever I told some of those similar type of stories where I emphasized the sexism, because where I emphasize like I've said, like, was it because I'm Black or because I'm a woman? Take your pick. But I was treated way differently. And so a lot of these experiences in ministry, and I didn't really even go into the woman aspect of it a lot, but there's a lot of even assaults on your humanity as a Black woman. And what I mean by this is, I'm not saying the Black men don't experience this, but y'all get the privilege of if you can say the right theology, if you can teach the right things, if you can whatever, they will treat you like a white man
Mm,
until it comes to their women. They will treat you just like one of them. You are one of them until they decide to pop off and be racist for some reason. But they will treat you very similar. And again, I'm not saying that y'all don't experience racism. I want to emphasize that because y'all absolutely do experience racism. But there were so many times as a black woman that I would be in context and I would just be asking the question like, ain't I a woman? Because I mentioned, you know, like I'm a tomboy. Like I've been a tomboy my whole life. Like I like, you know, I maybe dress like a little bit more kind of girly or feminine now. But like I've been like that my whole life. I love sports. My partner, my husband, like he's take it or leave it with sports. He's take it or leave it with he's more bookish. He's more like I'm gonna play computer games. I'm like, you know, I was a girl in college and stuff that I would be playing Halo because that was the game back then. I'd be playing Halo, you know, with the guys. So then I'm in youth ministry and something that used to irritate me to no end, because in particular in some of these church cultures where I was in, is that you would get Christians together, get Christian people together, and the men would go off and talk about ministry and they talk about the Bible and talk about this other stuff. And then the women would go off and they would be talking about like child rearing and like all this other type of stuff. And I'm not saying that those aren't significant conversations, but I always wanted to be over in the other conversation. Like especially whatever, you know, I didn't have kids. I was married, but I hadn't been married for a long time. I did not care to talk about the things because oftentimes now I've been in contexts where this hasn't happened, where the conversation with women has been just as robust and even better sometimes than what the men are talking about. But I've been in those highly gender segregated contexts where it's like the women, these white women, their conversation, everything was completely vapid, and it was just like, what on earth? Why? Like, I want to go over. I don't want to sit here on the porch and like talk and swap cheesecake recipes. I want to be in with the dudes playing Halo, and so I would just be in with the dudes playing Halo, and like I'd like, you know, bump that. I'm gonna play Halo. You know, bump that. Like I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna have my husband with me, so maybe it's not as awkward, but I'm just gonna be like, ooh, I'm with him. But then me, that was super quiet. Like he ain't trying to talk to nobody. So he's just sitting there. We're both, you know, introverted and whatever. I know that I maybe don't appear introverted now, but trust me, I am. I really am. Tyler can vouch for me. But like, you know, we would just be sitting and then, you know, I would be up in the conversation and stuff. But I say all that to say that that really started to weigh and to wear on me because it was like I was treated like an other. I wasn't a man and I wasn't a woman. I was just this other in this other category. And so I'm not saying I'm not non-binary. I know there's a lot of people out there that are non-binary and gender non-conforming. I identify as cisgender. And so for me it was like you're just treating me like what? Like I'm not a man. You don't want to treat me, and these are egalitarian settings, by the way. You don't want to treat me like one of the dudes, which I'm fine with. I'm not a dude. But then I'm not like whatever the heck enough for the women. So then if I'm not this or that, then what I am I? And the women's ministry, you know, situations often there were what was modeled in those contexts didn't fit me. How women, I would be told all the time. I've been married for I'll be married for 16 years in June, and um, I cannot tell you how many times in some of these contexts that people would tell me that my marriage was quote unquote weird,
mm.
that we're a weird couple, and I'm just sitting here like, what makes like it to me like I always was like I never wanted to really ask people because I wasn't really sure like what they meant, and but I was like I probably don't know want to know, but what I started to pick up on is the reason why my marriage was considered weird is because their idea of gender roles were different.
Hmm.
And the norms and stuff were different. Now, I mean, I was raised in a family culture that was very matriarchal. So like I have a couple of uncles that my grandma mostly had her living children were female. I had one uncle who passed away whenever I was my mom's brothers that passed away whenever I was younger. Then my grandma had another son who passed away whenever my mom was two. So most of my aunties and stuff, but like that, like most of the people in my family, the head of my family was my grandma, but it was mostly like strong women. And I was raised by a single mother. And that so I am used to being around strong women and strong women figures. And that's just what the way that my upbringing, the way that everything was. And so my marriage being weird to some of these people, it was because I guess our gender roles were different. Like I guess because like we both at the my husband cooks is the one who cooks now. He's a fantastic cook. Seminary, whatever. My life, I only cook on special occasions, which is fine. And but people were like, oh, that's weird. Like you both cook, or like we both would clean, or we both would do stuff. And even in egalitarian settings, it was just like, oh wow, that's really weird. Also because personality wise, like I'm I'm a decision maker in my home. I'm not always the sole decision maker. There's some decisions I'm like, whatever. I don't care. Do whatever we want to. But I'm outspoken. I'm not just like, okay, whatever. Do what you want. Like I'm not like that. So it was always characterized. I was always characterized as other. I guess and I could talk about the sports ball teams with people, and it was just weird. And so whenever I say other, I want to make sure like I'm not saying that I'm not trying to otherize people who don't conform to gender, but I'm talking about as a cisgender person
Right.
being treated as something that is just being treated as an object, really, and not being seen as in the fullness of my womanhood.
Wow. That is a conversation that needs to happen more. And here's something that I want to name that you mentioned that I think is so important is this is in egalitarian settings. It's so important to name that and say that. And it's also important to name the fact that in egalitarian Pentecostal settings, even in Black Pentecostal or charismatic or non-denominational settings, this exists as well, where you do have the presence of women who have stage time or are preaching occasionally, but are still boxed into what we consider to be gender roles and appropriate, whatever this may be. There's still unwritten rules even in the midst.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's important to name that because I think a lot of Black women, especially, experience that not just in white egalitarian settings or complementarian settings who are the easy target, but also
Mm-hmm.
Black settings as well.
Mm-hmm.
These very, men and women separations, these rigid gender roles. I mean, just all kinds of things that I think, have to be confronted.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that you named that because I think it's important for people, especially because Jamar and I's story interacts with Reformed theology and kind of the push there and the complementarianism. I think it's easy to make that the target and miss a broader principle that's at play in all of this. Wow. So, part two is coming up. There's so much to unpack. One of the things that I really want to, tell people is I'm very excited to I'm very eager to dive into what beyond our stories, what pain looks like, how we manage pain, how we deal with pain, how we confront our pain, um, and what we do with that, and how we name it, and how we hold space for it, and all the feelings that are accompanied with it, the anger, the frustration, how we do that in a healthy way, how we do that in a pure way. Um, and so as you've thought about this, and especially now experiencing part two next week, you know, what is your hope for those who are navigating this pain, and especially Black women? Because I think there's general application points and intersections for all of us. But the truth of the matter is it's different, and you're describing how different it is. And what is your hope that, for your story as it relates to Black women? And what do you hope that it 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 accomplishes in this growth as we talk about leave loud and stepping away from these spaces? How do you hope Black women interact with that story?
So I will say this without giving anything away is that Misogynoir makes a very strong guest appearance in next week's
A
episode.
featured guest.
It is a featured guest. It's a featured player. Like on Saturday Night Live, you have like those featured players that they have sometimes. Misogynoir is a featured player on part two of my story. And I think that what I hope that Black women take away from this particular section of my story is that it is okay to say that something is not okay,
Mm-hmm.
and that we don't have to swallow mistreatment in the name of like whatever it is that people are saying that we need to swallow mistreatment in the name of. And so I hope that hearing that part of my story, that people will feel empowered not to continue to tolerate mistreatment, because we're told that we have to tolerate mistreatment because doing so means that it makes us a good leader, or it means that we are following the leadership that's appointed over us, or whatever the heck, ignorant notions that are out there.
That's so real. That's so real. Man. Fam, I want to save the rest of this because I want to get into, I want to unpack this story next week. I want to say the rest of this. I want to unpack this story because there's just so much in this story that I can't wait to dive into. But yo, I want to emphasize this, and I know Ali's been talking a lot about this and sharing these stories. Y'all, if you free and you've been through some things, share that story. We want to hear this. You realize how many people are watching the Leave Loud hashtag and are getting free because they're reading stories from people like you? Yeah, I just want
Mm-hmm.
to say that, man. We've talked a lot about what Leave Loud looks like. Leave Loud, and this is something we discussed beforehand as well. Leave Loud is not just for prominent pastors or spiritual leaders or those with platforms. It's not even primarily about that, or if you would consider that us, it's not even primarily about us. It's
Mm-hmm.
about all of us. It's about every single one of our stories. And they're valid. And I can't tell you how many stories we get. So, man, share those Leave Loud stories. For some of you, it's not healthy for you to share that story right now. And that's okay. I hope that you feel seen and affirmed and valued, even in the midst of that pain. But for others of us, it's time for us to speak. And I have a lot of people in the inbox like, man, how can we tell these stories? We want to, man, you can write a pitch to the website and put that story out there. You can share it on social media. There's just so many different ways that you can share your story. And maybe it's not even through a place like the Witness. Maybe it's just through another outlet or through, whatever it may be. A lot of people are sharing stories in their own way. So I just want to emphasize that your story matters. And Ali, I thank you so much for being, courageous and brave enough to share. So far,
Can
just
I
part
can I
one.
say something to that point real quick?
Yes, go ahead, fire away.
Yeah, yeah. So to the point of sharing your story, using the Leave Loud hashtag if you're on Twitter. I mean, you can do it on Facebook too, and you can make the story public so more people are able to see it on the hashtag there. Same with here on Instagram. But something that I have seen happen in multiple times in these types of contexts is you have somebody tells one story, and then it opens the floodgate and other people start telling their stories. And something that I remember during a hashtag that I was involved with helping to build up whenever during my seminary days, we just started sharing a few of our little stories and stuff on the hashtag, And the hashtag ended up going viral in Christian spaces. And I don't say that because, we want viral posts, we want this and that. There might be reasons why, maybe, oh my gosh, somebody, Christianity Today or something like that picks up this hashtag. You might have reasons to not want your story out there. But I want to encourage you to use that hashtag to tell your story, because you might think whiteness loves to make us think that white supremacy loves to make us think that we are the only people who have the experiences that we have. And some of these local church contexts, something that I don't think we've hit on yet. I can't remember if we brought it up in the podcast or not. But Jamar's story, Tyler's story, those are all stories that have intersections with ministries, that with denominations, with whatever. But my story is a local church story, and that's where a lot of y'all are at, or you're in a local context, a localized context. And oftentimes in those localized contexts, you might think that you are the only person that's experiencing the exact thing that you've experienced. But then you start to share that story out, and other people see and hear, and they've had similar experiences or the same experience to almost the letter, to where you think, are you me? Like, did we go to the same church? And it's like, it's like, no, we're not. And it thrives. White supremacy thrives on that isolation. So us being able to tell our stories using the Leave Loud hashtag, it's a way for us to reclaim the narrative, and to reclaim our narrative, and to not let white people continue to control the narrative of Black people in their spaces.
Amen. Amen. So tell that story, y'all. Ali, thank you so much for taking some time out tonight. We're going to be back next Tuesday, and prayerfully we will be Lord willing, we will be at our 6 p.m. Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern. So I know people still getting off work, so not as many people can hop on. But man, thank you so much for telling your story, and I can't wait for people to hear part 2, and all that you're continuing to walk through. I appreciate you, friend. I appreciate you.
Yeah, I appreciate you too.
I appreciate you, fam.
Yes,
Thank y'all so
absolutely.
much. We love y'all. We'll see y'all next week.
Peace.
Peace.